The real Aladdin, and the empire that tried to erase his story. In a dusty, crowded market on the outskirts of a forgotten city, a barefoot boy named Ali sat crouched behind a stack of overturned baskets. His fingers were quick, trained to snatch a coin or a piece of fruit from a distracted merchant before disappearing into the maze of alleyways. But Ali wasn't just a street thief. His real name wasn't even Ali. It was Aladdin, a name whispered only by his late mother in their native dialect, a name that meant nobility of faith, but had long since been buried beneath the weight of survival. No one knew where he came from. Some said he was a desert orphan, others swore he was the bastard son of a palace concubine. The truth, as history would later try to erase, was more complicated and more magical than anyone could imagine. He lived in a time when the Middle East was a hotbed of fractured empires and secret societies. This was centuries before Disney, before European fairy tales twisted his name into fantasy. In those days, the region was ruled by a powerful empire, an empire that did not tolerate magic, rebellion, or inconvenient legends that challenged their version of order. And Aladdin was all three. As a boy, Aladdin slept in the abandoned ruins of an old bathhouse. The stones still whispered of better times, once echoing with laughter and steam, now just shelter for a boy forgotten by fate. But he didn't complain. Not out loud, anyway. His eyes were sharp, always watching, always learning. He listened to the spice traders tell tales of lands across the seas, of hidden cities buried in the sand, of kings who ruled from behind shadows. And most of all, he listened for stories about his own name. A name no one seemed to remember, but one he swore he would make known. One day that name would shake an empire. But back then, Aladdin was just another face in the crowd, until the day a strange man arrived. He was tall, cloaked in indigo, his beard braided in foreign patterns, and his eyes, piercing, calculating, settled on Aladdin with a chilling stillness. He said his name was Zahir, a traveling merchant in search of rare stones. But Aladdin noticed something. Zahir never actually bought anything. Instead, Zahir offered Aladdin a job, a real job. No more stealing, he promised. Just one task, one favor that would change his life. Aladdin, who had no family left, no coin to his name, and no illusions about the dangers of the world, agreed. Because beneath all his caution and street smarts, he was still a child. And children believe in miracles, even when the world gives them every reason not to. Zahir led him far beyond the city, past the sand-blasted hills where the desert swallowed ancient roads. For 3 days, they walked in silence. Aladdin's feet bled, his throat cracked, but he kept going. Zahir spoke only once. What lies beneath has waited centuries. It won't wait forever. On the 4th morning, just as the sun climbed over the jagged horizon, they reached a flat clearing of stone half buried by shifting dunes. It looked like nothing, just dust and wind. But then Zahir traced a symbol into the sand, a pattern of circles inside a star. The ground shook, the stone split, and the earth opened its jaws. Below, a staircase wound down into darkness. Zahir turned to Aladdin and handed him a small bronze ring. "This will protect you. Do not touch anything but the lamp, only the lamp. Bring it to me and you will be rich beyond your dreams." Aladdin stared into the pit. It smelled of sulfur and silence. He nodded. What happened next would not only ignite legends, it would launch a manhunt, a betrayal, and a cover-up so sweeping that generations would forget the real story. The empire would make sure of it. But at that moment, Aladdin didn't care. He was about to step into the unknown, heart pounding, ring clenched tight, with no idea that what he would find was not just a lamp, but a weapon. Let's forget the fairy tales. Forget the magic carpets, the talking parrots, and the firework-filled skies. Forget the Disney prince with perfect teeth and royal manners, because the real Aladdin was nothing like that. The real Aladdin was a barefoot street rat with sand in his mouth and revenge in his heart. And the empire he challenged wasn't made of cartoon palaces and sultans in turbans. It was real, it was brutal, and it erased him from history on purpose. The story you've been told? That's the version they wanted you to believe. A story about wishes and wonders, stripped of the blood, the betrayal, and the boy who should have never lived long enough to change anything. But he did. And for that, they buried him. The truth starts in the back alleys of a forgotten city, somewhere between modern-day Iran and the shifting borders of ancient Persia. No scholars agree on the exact map because the empire wiped those records clean. All that remains is dust, rumors, and one surviving name, Aladdin, the name that once made kings tremble. He was born in the gutter, they say. No father, no past. His mother, a washerwoman with cracked hands and a stitched-up face, died when he was 7, starved to death after the ration riots. Aladdin, or Ali as he was nicknamed, survived by disappearing. He lived in ruins, slept in burnt-out houses, and stole like it was a game he could win. But the city wasn't just any city. It sat on the fault lines of 3 empires, each watching the others, each wanting the same thing. The tombs buried beneath the sands. Tombs said to contain secrets left behind by the old ones. Not fairies, not jinn, something older, something dangerous, the kind of magic that empires would kill to hide. And Aladdin? He had no idea any of that mattered. All he wanted was bread. Until the day a man in black robes arrived. He didn't look like the rest. His robe was stitched with a pattern no local recognized, and he wore a ring with a cracked red stone that pulsed like it was alive. He came through the market without speaking, without buying. His eyes swept the crowd until they stopped on a boy with cracked lips and eyes too sharp for his age. That boy was Aladdin. The man's name was Zahir. He didn't ask Aladdin for help. He ordered it. "I need a thief," he said, "not a child." Aladdin stood his ground. "Then find someone else." Zahir smiled for the first time, but it wasn't warm. "You're not just a thief. You're invisible. You know every alley, every crack. I need someone like that. One job. You do it, and I'll make you rich enough to never steal again." He should have run. But something about the way Zahir spoke, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like destiny. So Aladdin followed him. For 2 days they crossed the city walls and headed east, into the Black Dunes, a wasteland where the wind moaned like ghosts. People said there were ruins out there, swallowed by time, but no one went near them. Soldiers disappeared. Camels turned mad. Even the nomads avoided the dunes like they were cursed. On the 3rd day, they reached a circle of jagged stones, blackened as if struck by lightning. In the center, a flat slab carved with strange symbols. Zahir pulled out a blade and sliced his own palm. Blood dripped onto the stone. The ground shook. Aladdin stumbled back as a crack opened in the earth. Stairs spiraled downward into blackness. The air smelled like ash and metal. "This," Zahir said, "is the place your ancestors feared." Aladdin stared down. "What's in there?" Zahir handed him a ring. "A lamp. But not just any lamp. This one was sealed before your empire even had a name. Bring it to me, and your life changes forever. Touch nothing else." He hesitated. "What if I don't come back?" Zahir didn't answer. Aladdin descended. The air grew colder with each step. The stone walls whispered as if they remembered the dead. In the final chamber he found it, a pedestal, a lamp, and carvings etched with symbols older than any language he knew. But something was wrong. The lamp pulsed, like it was breathing. As he stepped forward, voices echoed in the dark. Not words, sounds, warnings. He grabbed the lamp, and the ground exploded. Flames erupted around him, but he wasn't burning. The ring Zahir gave him glowed, shielding him. Shadows moved, not smoke, figures. Something ancient had been trapped, and now it was awake. Aladdin didn't wait. He ran, up the stairs, out of the pit, into the blinding sun. Zahir was gone. All that remained was a scorched ring of sand and a single footprint burned into the stone. He had been tricked, but not killed. That night, Aladdin lit a small fire and examined the lamp. It was heavy, not gold, iron, covered in dust and strange writing. When he wiped it clean, his fingers brushed the spout, and something spoke. It wasn't a jinn, not the kind from bedtime stories. This voice was cold, intelligent, and furious. "You freed me," it said. Aladdin staggered back. "What are you?" "I was power. I was king. They buried me, and now you will finish what I started." He didn't understand then. Not really, but he would. The lamp didn't grant wishes. It gave commands, visions, secrets. It showed him things, cities that had never existed, maps that had been erased, names that hadn't been spoken for centuries. And most of all, it showed him the truth. His bloodline wasn't nothing. He came from a line that the Empire had hunted to extinction. The lamp belonged to them. And now, so did he. For hours, Aladdin stared at the lamp. He didn't sleep. He didn't move. The desert wind howled outside the broken ruins he'd crawled into for shelter, but inside was silence, except for the voice still echoing in his head. "I was power. I was silence. I was buried. And now I choose you." No genie appeared. No blinding blue smoke. No booming voice offering 3 wishes. Just a whisper, low, deliberate, impossible to locate, yet unmistakably inside his skull. The lamp sat cold in his hands, heavy like a prison cell and scarred like it had survived 1,000 wars. This was not the shiny object from fairy tales. This was a relic, a weapon, a message, but from who? "Speak again," Aladdin whispered. He didn't know why he was talking to it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe madness. Or maybe he already knew that his life had crossed a line and nothing would ever be normal again. "I did not come to grant," the voice finally answered. "I came to reveal." "To reveal what?" Aladdin said aloud. "History." And suddenly it began. His mind burned, not with pain, but with images. They rushed at him like floodwaters breaking through a dam. A man in robes crowned with a snake, a battle beneath a red eclipse, a city on fire, a woman holding the lamp, raising it above her head as soldiers bowed before her. And then, betrayal. Blades drawn, secrets buried, and the lamp locked away under blood and stone. Aladdin gasped and dropped the lamp. His fingers trembled. His heart pounded like it was trying to tear through his chest. He stumbled outside into the night, throwing up sand, gripping his head. It wasn't just a hallucination, it was knowledge, memory, someone else's past stuffed into his skull, and it was only the beginning. That's when he realized. The lamp wasn't magical. It was ancient technology, a kind that had been hidden, protected, and feared for centuries, not because it granted wishes, but because it told the truth. It stored it, and it could show it to anyone it chose. And now, for reasons Aladdin couldn't understand, it had chosen him. He knew what that meant. Someone would come looking for it. And when they did, they wouldn't care about him, only the lamp. The next morning, Aladdin vanished into the underworld of the city. Not the marketplaces or alleyways, those were too obvious. He went beneath, into the tunnels under the old temples where tomb robbers and runaway slaves whispered secrets into the dark. He needed answers, and there was only one place left to ask. An old woman, once a scribe for the royal palace, now blind and half-mad, sat in a chamber lit by green fungus and candle smoke. They called her Muta. No one knew her real name. Some said she'd lived 3 lifetimes. Others said she was cursed to never die until the empire itself fell. She laughed when Aladdin showed her the lamp. "Oh, boy," she croaked, "you've brought death into my home." "What is it?" he asked. "Not what. Who?" She reached toward it with twisted fingers, then pulled back. "It's talking, isn't it?" "You know it?" "I knew the last one who held it," she said. Her name was Samira. She led a rebellion. The lamp showed her the truth. About the empire. About the blood they spilled to rise to power. She tried to use that truth. Thought she could wake the people. Thought they'd care. But the empire caught her. Executed her. Wiped her from every scroll. Then buried the lamp under a false tomb in the desert. Aladdin's chest tightened. Why hide the lamp? Because it contains their greatest fear, history. She leaned closer. You don't understand, boy. The empire controls what people remember. It rewrites the past so it can rule the present. This thing you're holding, it remembers. It won't forget. And neither will they. Over the next few days, Aladdin stopped being a thief and became something else, something more dangerous. A seeker. He no longer stole for bread. He stole for information. He followed the empire's scribes, broke into vaults, copied names, maps, bloodlines. He traced Samira's rebellion, found out it had started in the southern provinces and spread like fire until it was extinguished in a single week of silence. An entire generation wiped out and rebranded as traitors. But in the vaults of the palace, hidden behind false ledgers, he found something even stranger. His mother's name, listed not as a washerwoman, but as a scribe's daughter, a descendant of the very bloodline that once held the lamp. He stared at the page until it blurred. That's why Zahir had found him. That's why the lamp responded to him. He wasn't chosen by fate. He was born into this war. But Aladdin wasn't the only one searching. The empire had noticed the break-in. They found Zahir's burned footprint in the desert. They traced the old bloodlines. They knew what had been disturbed. They sent riders. One evening, as Aladdin returned from a hidden archive, he saw the flames first. Then the screams. The tunnels he once called home were being purged. Mutaz's chamber collapsed in fire. Friends he once shared food with were dragged from the shadows and executed in the square. They didn't say why. They didn't need to. He knew. The lamp had made him a threat. That night, the voice inside the lamp spoke again. You are not the first to run, it said. You are not the first to lose. But if you do not fight, you will be the last. Aladdin stared at the object in his hands. The empire wanted it gone. History wanted it told. And he just wanted to survive. But something inside him, maybe the same thing that had kept him alive all these years, started to shift. He wasn't just a thief anymore. He was a witness. And once you've seen the truth, pretending not to isn't survival. It's surrender. The fire still burned in the tunnels below the city. Smoke poured from the old temple shafts, like the earth itself was choking. And Aladdin stood on a rooftop, his hands trembling, the lamp clutched under his cloak like a heart that didn't belong to him. He had never seen bodies piled that high before, not during food riots, not during palace purges. This was different. This was personal. They weren't just hunting rebels anymore. They were hunting memory. The empire had made its move. Now, it was his turn. Aladdin didn't know how to start a rebellion. He didn't even know how to lead. All he had were secrets, and a lamp that whispered truths no one else dared to say. But the lamp did more than speak. It showed. That night, in the ruins of a collapsed granary, Aladdin lit a single candle and set the lamp beside it. He took a deep breath, placed both hands on the metal, and whispered, "Show me everything." And it did. Visions poured through him like lightning. Not just images, but plans. Maps of cities built on lies. Family trees twisted by propaganda. Entire lineages scrubbed from existence because they carried a name the Empire didn't want remembered. The lamp showed him Samira again, the woman Muta'a had named. Her face was scarred, but her eyes burned with defiance. She had once stood where Aladdin stood now, lamp in hand, hoping truth would be enough. She had failed, but she'd also left behind something. A message, a location, a chance. Buried beneath the sands east of the city was an archive, not of the Empire, but of the Resistance. A vault of documents, names, voices, proof of what had been erased. If Aladdin could reach it, he could bring back everything they had tried to destroy, but he couldn't do it alone. He began recruiting the only people who would listen, those who had nothing left to lose. Street children like him, forgotten craftsmen, dishonored scribes. One by one, he told them what the lamp had shown him. Not all at once, never the full truth, but just enough. Enough to make them ask questions. Enough to make them angry. He didn't call it a rebellion. He called it a reckoning. At night, they met in the bone pits near the butcher's quarter, places too foul for even the Empire's spies to linger. By day, they blended in, selling spice, carrying water, watching the guards, smiling like nothing had changed, but everything had. Aladdin used the lamp sparingly. Every time he touched it, it showed him more, and every time it felt like he lost something. A part of himself, a memory, a name. It was as if the lamp was feeding on him too. He didn't care. Truth came with a cost. When they found the first scroll buried under the shrine ruins, it changed everything. The scroll wasn't old, it was fresh, written only weeks before Samira was executed, and it revealed something no one had dared speak aloud in years. The emperor wasn't the rightful heir. He was a general's son, not a blood prince. The royal family had been overthrown and the truth rewritten in a single generation. The lamp had been part of the royal inheritance. That's why it had to be hidden. That's why Aladdin's bloodline had to be erased. Because the lamp could verify blood, and his blood matched. He didn't tell the others at first. He didn't want to be worshipped. He didn't want to be king. He just wanted to tear down the lie. But the lamp whispered otherwise. "You are not only a threat," it said. "You are a symbol." "What if I don't want to be?" Aladdin asked. "You think Samira did?" They traveled by night, using tunnels and salt roads, toward the vault in the desert. The Empire was watching every road. Patrols doubled. Disappearances surged. But they had learned to move like ghosts. Still, not all of them made it. Aladdin lost 3 of his closest allies before they reached the ruins, slain in ambushes, dragged into palaces, never seen again. By the time they stood before the sunken dome of the archive, half buried in the sand, they were no longer a band of outcasts. They were survivors. Inside the archive, it was like walking into forbidden time, shelves lined with letters, maps of forbidden kingdoms, names written in ink made from crushed stones that glowed faintly under torchlight. And at the very back, a mirror. Not glass, stone, smooth as water. The lamp pulsed in Aladdin's hand. "It's not a mirror," he whispered. "It's a gate." And when he held the lamp to it, the stone shimmered. The reflection was not his own. It was Samira. She spoke without moving her lips, her voice not in his ears, but in his chest. "You found it," she said. "Now make them remember." They emerged from the vault with proof, not just papers, not just names, footage, images. Ancient recordings stored in the lamp, captured by a lens the Empire didn't know still existed. And with that, they did what no one expected. They broadcast it. From rooftops, from tunnels, in secret markets, through stolen palace channels, they showed the people the truth, and the Empire lost control. Riots spread, scholars defected, entire cities refused to pay taxes, and Aladdin, once a thief, once a nobody, became the name on everyone's lips. Not as a prince, not as a prophet, as a reminder that lies can only live in silence, and he was the noise. Revolutions don't end with the truth, they begin with it. Aladdin had struck a match in a world soaked with oil. The moment the truth spread, the real lineage of the emperor, the archive footage, the records of blood, people didn't fall to their knees in awe. They rose to their feet in fury. The empire didn't collapse overnight. Empires never do. It dug in, like a wounded beast. And when a beast bleeds, it bites harder. Within days, Aladdin's name was declared forbidden. His face was plastered on every wall, eyes scratched out, labeled a terrorist, a liar, a pretender. Anyone caught uttering his name was arrested. His allies were rounded up, tortured in public squares, made into examples. The message was clear: truth won't save you. Obedience will. Aladdin wasn't shocked, but it still hurt. He never wanted to be worshipped. And yet, his image, real and faked, was now everywhere. A symbol of hope, a target for blame, a ghost that lived in the hearts of rebels and nightmares of kings. He had become what Samira once was, and he knew how her story ended. But the lamp didn't let him forget his path. You hold not just their future, it whispered, but their memory. You must choose what survives. Aladdin didn't sleep. He barely ate. The lamp showed him more than he wanted to see. Secrets within secrets. Assassins trained by the royal court, poisoned scrolls, underground prisons buried beneath fake granaries. The empire had always ruled through shadows. But now those shadows moved differently, because they were watching him. It was a boy named Ilyas who brought the first real warning. Barely 12, fast hands, bright eyes, the kind of boy Aladdin would have taught to steal back in the old days. Ilyas burst into the safe house one night, panting, bleeding from a cut on his cheek. "They know where you sleep," he said. "I saw them. Black-robed. The Emperor's private guard. The ones who don't speak." Aladdin's heart froze. The obsidian hand. They weren't soldiers. They were shadows in human form, trained to erase threats before anyone ever noticed they existed. If they were here, it meant only one thing. The Emperor wasn't trying to kill the rebellion anymore. He was trying to kill the story. They ran, again. Aladdin, Ilyas, and a dwindling band of rebels, some injured, others numb with fear, left the city that night under the cover of smoke. They knew the escape tunnels well. They'd built half of them, but halfway through the route they hit silence. Not the good kind, the heavy kind, the kind that makes your skin crawl. The tunnel had been compromised. Aladdin's second-in-command, Farid, took point to scout. He never came back. They doubled back, but it was too late. The exits collapsed. The tunnels were sealed from above. Someone had betrayed them. And the worst part? Aladdin knew who it was. Her name was Luma. She had joined the cause 6 months ago. A former palace handmaiden, she'd smuggled out blueprints, passwords, even stolen scrolls. She'd earned their trust, earned his trust. She had even held the lamp once, and it hadn't burned her. That was supposed to mean something. But trust is a dangerous thing when your enemy specializes in rewriting the past. She was gone by the time they reached the surface, leaving behind only an empty flask with the imperial seal burned into the bottom. Ilyas looked up at Aladdin. "She was one of us." "No," Aladdin said quietly. "She was one of them." The betrayal nearly broke him. The weight of it, the exhaustion, the deaths, all of it pressed down like stone. He found himself in the desert again, the same ridge where Zahir had first opened the earth and led him to the lamp. And for the first time since all this began, Aladdin wanted to be done. He stood on the edge and raised the lamp above his head. "Is this what you wanted?" he shouted. "All of this? Was I just a vessel for your war?" The wind answered him, hot, dry, silent. But then the lamp spoke softer than ever before. "You are not a vessel," it said. "You are the memory, and memories do not break. They are carried." Aladdin fell to his knees. He didn't cry. He had no tears left. But he made a decision. He would carry it, even if no one else could. When he returned to what was left of the rebellion, he didn't bring rage. He brought a plan. The Empire wanted to erase him? Fine. He would become impossible to forget. He began recording, speaking into the lamp, into mirrors, into stolen imperial crystal. Every truth, every detail, every death, every betrayal. He carved stories into walls, etched names into stone, buried scrolls in places no one would expect. If they killed him, they wouldn't kill the truth. And that, more than any army, was what scared the Empire most. He understood now what Samira had meant, why she let herself be captured. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to endure. The lamp showed him one final vision. A room, circular, underground, filled with books and glowing panels. In its center, a throne made of obsidian and glass. And on it, the Emperor. Older than anyone suspected, thin, hooked eyes, lips like razors. He didn't speak in the vision. He just stared straight into Aladdin's soul, as if he knew the lamp was watching. Then the vision cut. The message was clear. The Emperor was waiting. Not to fight, to finish what he started. They called him a ghost. Some whispered that Aladdin had died in the fire that burned the last rebel stronghold. Others claimed they'd seen him in the eastern provinces, moving through marketplaces in silence, leaving scrolls behind like breadcrumbs. A few believed he had never existed at all, that he was just another story in a city that had forgotten how to tell the truth. The Empire made sure to encourage that doubt. They flooded the streets with their own storytellers, men with silver tongues and official seals, rebranding the rebellion as a riot, the archive as a myth, the lamp as superstition. Every image of Aladdin was destroyed. His name was erased from birth records, school books, and temple walls. But they made one fatal mistake. They tried to erase a memory that had already been passed on. It started small. A girl named Safa in a remote mountain village found a carved stone beneath her bed. On it, the words, "Truth remembers." A farmer in the southern fields uncovered a jar of dried scrolls buried beneath his family well, scrolls that told of Samira, of the bloodline, of the lamp. In a crowded port town, a merchant's child found a shard of obsidian in a pile of discarded glass. When he touched it, he saw faces, dozens of them, rebels, fighters, survivors. And then, the boy saw him, Aladdin, not as a prince, not as a hero, but as a boy who chose to remember when everyone else chose to forget. You see, Aladdin never returned to the Empire. He didn't need to. He had already buried his truth in 1,000 places, encoded in 1,000 forms, stone, ink, metal, crystal, whispers. He had turned himself into a story, not the soft, glowing kind, the sharp kind, the kind that cuts through silence. And every time someone uncovered a piece of it, the story came back to life. People began to question again. They began to ask, if the Emperor was never truly royal, who was? If Samira was a rebel, why did her words sound like prophecy? And who really was the boy with the lamp? The Empire panicked. They raided homes looking for scrolls, relics, fragments. They burned books, outlawed storytelling in certain dialects. They banned children's songs that referenced lamps. They arrested school teachers for using forbidden names. But it was already too late, because the truth wasn't hiding in a vault anymore. It was in the mouths of children, in the ink of street murals, in the rhythm of songs hummed under breath. It was in the silence between lies. And the more they tried to silence it, the louder it got. Aladdin had disappeared, but his story refused to die. No one knows where he went in the end. Some say he crossed the eastern wastes, traveling alone until he reached the fabled lost city that the lamp once showed him, where he buried the last of its power beneath an unmarked cairn. Others say he returned to the place where Zahir first opened the earth and cast the lamp back into the void from where it came, choosing to let the world learn to fight without it. And there are those who believe he's still alive, that he walks the world wearing 1,000 faces, planting truth in places where lies still rule. But none of that really matters, because the story was never about how Aladdin ended. It was about what he started. He didn't overthrow an empire. He exposed one. He didn't become a king. He became a key to memory, to resistance, to the idea that one person, one forgotten boy, could hold a mirror up to the world and say, "This is what you've been hiding from." That's why the empire hated him, not because he fought them, but because he made them look. And now, centuries later, the story remains. It's not in the history books. You won't find it in museums. You won't hear it in official broadcasts. But if you listen closely, really listen, you'll find it. In the cracks between stories. In names that sound too old to be fake. In the eyes of people who remember more than they're supposed to. That story is waiting for someone else. Maybe someone like you, to find it, to carry it, to keep it alive. Because every empire will try to erase the truth, but as long as someone remembers that the real story will never disappear. If this story moved you, don't let it vanish. Like it, comment on it, share it. Click that subscribe button to Uncle Luke Tells History channel, where the stories no one dares to tell are just getting started.